So we're able to log in and register and either create the user and navigate to the profile, or log in and navigate to the profile page. But the profile page here stands alone, right? It doesn't know anything about any session information. As far as the server is concerned, as far as the client is concerned, there is no remembering anything between one request and the next, right? And that's, again, it's a feature of the HTTP protocol. It's stateless. And so to get around that issue, we invented a technology based on a very easy idea, right? It's the cookie idea, right? That the server and the client somehow can participate in a protocol where the client identifies itself every time it goes back for anything back to the server, right? The server and client agree, right, that when it's the same client, it will provide a token, right, that identifies them with the server. The server sees a query from the client, and it says, "Oh, I don't know who you are because you're not providing me any cookie. So here's a cookie." The server says, "If you want to participate, if you want me to remember you, here's a token." Okay. And as long as you provide the same token over and over, I'll remember that it's you next time around. Okay, and notice that in the network, you'll see that the server is indeed providing me every time I navigate from an HTML or JavaScript or any request. The server is providing me with this cookie. Called the JSession ID. That's coming from the Spring Boot framework. All right, and so the client, the browser, can either decide to participate or not. Right? If they want to participate, they need to be able to say, okay, I'm going to store that cookie, that JSession ID. If I want the server to remember that it's me again, I need to provide that session ID, okay, back to the server. All right, so how do we do that? All right, so to do that, we need to do a couple of things. Right? First, we need to tell the client the JavaScript part of it, right, that every time for instance, when we register, hey, provide that cookie that the server provided. Provide that, right, so that the server can then remember you. Same thing when you log in, right, so they can remember you. So we need to change the client to participate in this protocol. We also need to change the server to store something to remember what it is that we want to remember. For instance, we like to remember if you logged in or you registered, we like to remember who it was that registered, right? Maybe you like to store the current server, the current user in some place that we can remember. All right. So let's do that. In both places, the client and the server, they have specific APIs that allow you to do this. All right. So let's look at the server first. Okay. What do we do on the server? So on the server, what we're going to do is the following. In the registration, in the register here, what we're going to do is say, hey, we like to participate in a session. Right? We like to be able to remember that this user we just saved, this user we just wrote to the server, it's the current user. Right? And that means to us whatever that means to us. However we want to use that idea, right? However we want to do that. What we're going to do is that we're going to this current user, we're going to store it in a local variable, user, current user. We could call it whatever we want. Okay? And then we're going to store it somewhere. Where do we store it? Right? And then we're going to return it. We're going to say return the current user. Right? But here, between these two lines, we need to store it somewhere, right? So that when we come back later, when we go to profile or logging in, we can remember that it's still the same person. Okay? All right. So how do we do that? We add here an additional parameter, right, that we're going to ask to be injected into this call. Right? We also want the HTTP session right here. Pass me the session. Right? This is an API that allows us to participate in this cookie. Right? Now, we don't want to have to deal with the individual cookies and what their names are. We'll just call it JSession ID or whatever, or the actual value, that randomly generated value. Notice that they're all some random generated. That's way too low level. Okay? I mean, you could, but we don't want to. Let's keep it high level. All right. So the HTTP session, it's a high level API that hides all this from us. Okay. And what it does is that it creates for us here a map, like a hash table, that we can store anything we want in there. Right. And it's as long as we are the same session ID, we're always gonna get the same information there. Whatever we store there, it'll remember next time around. Okay, what are we going to store in there? We're going to store in there, in the session, we're going to store, we're going to set an attribute. We're going to give it a name. We'll call it current user. It doesn't, again, it could be anything we want. What are we storing there? A local variable. It doesn't have to be the same name. These don't have to match. All right, let's not match it. So let's say CU and CU. How's that? Just to make sure that you don't think these have to match. Okay. The only reason I stored it in a local variable was more convenient, more didactical. All right. So we're storing it in a session variable called current user. As long as we remember where we put it, we can retrieve it later. Okay. So we have to remember where we put it. Right. That's the string where we put it in. Right. So this is like a hash map. We put it in there. Everybody okay? All right. So that means that once we put it in there, next time around, if you do a get, right, and we say retrieve for me check login, say retrieve for me public user check login. Find me who's the currently logged in user. I can retrieve for you from the session. I can retrieve for you return session dot get the attribute, the same name that I put it, current user. Okay. The get attribute returns object, so you need to cast it. So we're going to cast it to user. We need to remember the type of whatever we stored in there because we need to cast it back to the original data type. Okay. All right. So let's try this. Let's try that. Let's run it again. Let's restart. So this register will put it in the current user, and this will allow us to retrieve it, right, in a get. Right. All right. So let's try it out. Let's see. Well, what users do we have? W, Bob, Alice, Charlie, Dan. Okay, so let's register. Let's go back and go to sign up, and let's try Dan. Dan and Dan. Register. It navigates to profile. So hopefully now Dan is stored in the current user. All right. So let's hit our server at localhost 8080. And I think we mapped it to check login, and it didn't work. What? Check login, current user. I think we forgot something. We worked on this on the server side, but we never worked on the client side, right? If you'll notice, this inspect the request in the network. Notice that the session ID ends with 6116, but this profile over here, if we look at the network, it ends with 72FD, right? So they're not participating in the same session, right? We need both to be in the same session. So I probably put it right in the session under a different ID. So somehow we need to have the client say, hey, it's the same ID, right? So let's do that. Let's on the client side. Once we register, let's go to the register controller. Here, what we need to do is that hey, this fetch when we send over, we say hey, we want to use the same cookie that you sent us. Right? So you sent us a cookie when we were loading this JavaScript. I want to use the same cookie because I want to participate in and when you get on the other side, we want to make sure that we use the same cookie. All right. So let's do that. So to do that, we need to use credentials include. Right, include the credentials, which is basically include that cookie that goes out to the server. All right, let's see. Let's try this again. We'll go back to the register page and let's try some other user. Register, and probably this won't work either, right? Because we're still in a different query. We need to do this we need to do this programmatically from within the controller and say, hey, we want to use the same cookie, right? So let's do that. Let's go to the controller for the profile. Let's see, profile. Here's a profile. Let's create a script here. So script. We need a source. We need let's see. What do we need? There'll be profile.controller.client.js, and let's create that. Let's create in the web app new. There we go. And what are we going to do here? We'll do function. An iffy, and here, what do we want to do? The first thing, we're going to do a fetch. We're going to go to that URL, check login, and what are we doing here? It's a get, so that's by default. We're not going to override that, but we do want to use the same cookie, right? So here will be credentials, and this will be include, and this will then be function. Let's see what the server comes back with. Here's the response from the server, and we do a console log response. All right, let's try that again. Do we load it? I think so, right? We have the script, the controller, and from the template. And here's the profile. All right, so let's try it out. Let's go to the register, and let's try to use someone else. And let's clear this out. Let's do a register. And let's see, we went to check login. It went, and in the preview, it didn't work. What is the URL? Downgrade, the JSON. The JSON is not, the JSON ID, JSession ID is not the same. All right, I'll need to debug it.